Fermentation is transformation. If there were toxins, for example, if your food were sprayed with a chemical, actually the fermentation removes that.
Hey there, it's Dr. WilliamLi. I am physician, author, and scientist, and I'm actually doing this video series with my friends and colleagues, specifically like-minded doctors, to be able to have a conversation about the real experiences that we have with food and health, and really to kind of get the people who are watching and listening to this the feeling that they're just a fly in the wall listening to friends talk about things that they care about. So I'm here today with my good friend and awesome fellow author, Dr. Will Bulsiewicz, the fiber fueled doc, who we developed our friendship a few years ago before you had your first book out. And I remember chatting with you about my experiences and just trying to share with you what I encountered that was new, that I wished I had been prepared for. And then I watched you walk up to bat and swing it and hit like a home run the first time. So anyway, it's great to see you, Will. Let's just talk about something we did recently. So I know you've been in the middle of a really big thing. What is that big thing?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me. It's exciting. I launched my second book, and it was interesting this time around. So going back to the first book, my first book was fiber fueled. You and I connected for the first time at effectively like a retreat.
Yeah.
And there were hundreds of people there. And yet in this massive event, we found each other, and it was like an instant connection.
I remember, by the way, it was like at the opening reception, and it was like you and I were like the two nerdy guys at the high school dance, standing off in one corner, right? And everyone else was just doing their networky thing, and like there were just the two of us standing there, and they were like, "Why are we here?"
Yeah. Yeah, I think we felt a little bit out of place, and we found each other. I like the high school analogy. I think it makes a lot of sense. And then next thing you know, we're like sitting at the same table enjoying breakfast together, and our relationship started there. You actually were quoted on the cover of my first book, and the book came out in May of 2020. And the thing about it is that in that position, there were zero expectations. It is a pandemic. My entire book launch campaign has been upended. I was supposed to fly out to LA and like do shows like Rich Roll, canceled. And it turned out really well, actually. Things went really well. I've since sold over 200,000 copies of Fiber Fueled.
Listen, I'm just telling you, like, for anybody listening to this, so I was quietly crossing my fingers and toes for you during your first book launch, because the world was flying apart. Like no one knew what the heck was happening as the pandemic was unfolding, right? Remember, like TV was all about all the death and destruction, and no one knew exactly what was going on, and doctors, even the medical community, was fleeing from what was happening or struggling to just kind of stay afloat. And I thought, oh my gosh, my friend Will is going to be flying into this Category 5 hurricane. And little did I know,
in a triangle.
Little did I know that you actually had like a supersonic jet that could fly through these clouds, and you came out very quickly on top. So what did that feel like? I mean, it must have felt really weird to be so successful. I mean, like you must have connected with people in a way that you're still connecting with people, even when all this other stuff was going on. It's like, what is it about you?
Well, I think there's a little bit of a story to this. So, effectively what happened, I was up, actually, a lot of people have never heard this story before. I've never talked about this on a podcast. I was up in New York in early March, and I was recording a podcast with my friend Simon Hill from The Proof. It used to be called Plant Proof.
Right.
And so we record a podcast, and we go out to dinner, And it was like the weekend that it all changed. We went out to dinner, and the next day I was supposed to meet my friend who's the chief spice mama on social media,
Right.
and Kanchan Koya, and I was supposed to meet her for breakfast. We canceled because it's like the world is ending. Like there is a pandemic in New York City. I come back to Charleston wearing an N95 mask in LaGuardia Airport. Okay, I like flew up for just a weekend. I come back wearing an N95 mask. My practice is upended. All right, 50% of what we do is colonoscopy. Colonoscopy is shut down. We're not allowed to do it. So I'm sitting there in late March, and I'm like, my life is falling apart. I don't have the ability to make money for my family, and my book launch is a disaster. And after moping around for a couple of weeks, because I did do that, I did mope around for a couple of weeks. I got to a point where I was like, forget this. The moping does no good. Where are people? Because people still exist. In fact, if anything, people have more time because a lot of people aren't working right now.
Right.
Where are they? Well, they're not at Barnes and Noble anymore. Now they're on their phone. So I built my entire book launch around trying to connect to people.
You rebuilt it.
Yeah.
You rebuilt it.
Yeah, I had to pivot, and I went in a brand new direction, literally just in the last couple of weeks leading up to the book launch. It's like, new idea. Here's what I'm going to try. And I reached out to all these different people online personalities. And I said to them, my book launch has been destroyed. Is there any chance you'd be willing to support me and do an Instagram live? And I did an entire book launch from basically like a chair.
Like you were like, I mean, first of all, for anybody watching or listening, this story that you've just told me, Will, is like one of the ultimate stories I've heard about resilience, right? So here you were with perfectly good plans that were completely upended, and you thought about it. You didn't panic, but you thought about it and realized that it was time for you to figure out a new plan A. You leveraged what you believed were going to be necessary for you to be able, the resources to be able to fly, and you got in a cockpit and you took off and you flew. I mean, so this time, right? So this is the first book was called Fiber Fueled, which is about the gut microbiome and how amazingly empowered you can be yourself to be able to have better gut health. But this one is a cookbook based on the first one, right? So what's this one about?
Well, first of all, this book, I wholeheartedly believed in just as much as I did my first book. My first book was a passion project. And I view it as the first book is why you should care about gut health. This book is the how. It's actually so much more than a cookbook. If you go to Amazon reviews and you read them, this is what everyone says. They're like, this is way more than a cookbook. I was expecting recipes and I got a lot more. And so I knew that I had, going into the book launch, something special that no one had seen and they would not see until the book actually comes out. And I effectively, what I did, Will, is I doubled down on the strategy that I used before. So I knew the way to connect with people is like, I want them to hear the story. That's podcasting.
Yeah.
And I want them to have live interactions with me in person. Like if you want to meet the author, I'll give you 100 opportunities, and you can do it from your living room in your PJs.
Right.
So,
so these were the Instagrams that you did, IG lives.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And the book came out, and you don't know what's going to happen, but there are expectations this time around. The first time was a surprise. This time it's more like people are expecting something. And the book came out, and during launch week, it sold 28,000 copies.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And I thought I had a shot at number one on the New York Times. Now, here's the interesting thing about it. The book, Atomic Habits, is actually selling more copies in year 4 than it sold in year 1.
By the way, have you read that book?
I have not. I've heard great things about it though.
I have it in my library, and I got it because you know what? Actually, I would tell you it's worth reading because it's really about this idea that small things actually have big impacts, and that if you have a habit of doing a lot of little small things, you can actually reap a lot of the benefits from it. And I actually think that it's relevant to putting those action steps that you have in the fiber fueled cookbook, because basically what you have, what you've just launched is really a action guide, right? So the first one is the what, and this is the how. It's the action guide. And you know, I think a lot of people wind up getting overwhelmed unless they're really familiar with changing their lifestyle, doing everything all at the same time. And one of the things that I'm a big believer on is like, you know, just take one baby step
Totally.
that works for you, and you'll be rewarded with just that baby step. And that just shows you can take another baby step.
Oh, I so wholeheartedly agree with that actually. So if you go back to the very beginning for me, you know, when I'm at my lowest point in my life and I need to figure out a way to dig myself out of this hole that I'm in, the transitional moment, and this literally happened. This is not just a story. This literally happened. I diverted away from Hardee's, which is where I typically went for dinner. I was in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And at Hardee's for $5, you can get about 2,500 calories. They would give you a double cheeseburger, a chili cheese dog, fries, a beverage, and an apple pie. All right. For $5. And I diverted home. And the issue is I'm not a French trained chef. I needed something easy. So I pulled out a blender and I made a massive smoothie. And I felt so energized.
Hey there, I've got an exciting resource just for you, and it's all about the 5 brain-boosting habits for longevity. These simple but powerful habits are all based on science that can help elevate your brain's cognitive ability and support your overall brain health. If you're ready to unlock the secrets to a sharper mind and a healthier future, then click the link below the video to access this valuable information. Or you can take out your smartphone and scan the QR code on the screen right now. Now, let's get back to the video.
What made you do that though? What was going on in your head that said, you know what, I'm just gonna screw the Hardee's. I'm just gonna I'm gonna pull this stuff out and make it myself.
Well, this was the moment that was built up too. It's not like it happened overnight.
Okay.
During my medical training, you know how it goes. I was working 6 days a week, 15 hours a day, sometimes 30 hours in a row, many times without even eating.
Yeah, right.
And
we were, by the way, the world's expert of time restricted feeding when we were training.
Yeah. Well, and also it was a sleep deprivation lab.
And sleep deprivation. Well, yeah. It's sort of like going against each other.
They're going against each other. And that's the issue is like, you know, you actually put your body through a lot, even though you're in your late 20s, early 30s. And unfortunately, ultra processed foods and fast foods, they fit so conveniently and perfectly. Cheap, quick, easy, tastes great. No denying that. It tastes good. And so it just fits so perfectly in my life. But there's a compromise that you make, which is that you compromise your health. It just takes years to show up. That's the problem. So there I was, and my health had been compromised. And I was quite miserable. I was 50 pounds overweight. I was depressed, anxious. 50, 50.
Oh my gosh.
Seriously, I weighed 240. I weighed 240. Now I'm 6
How tall are you?
I'm 6'3", 6'4". So I'm a pretty tall guy, so I can hide it. But it was there. I could see it in the mirror when I'm looking.
And what you can't see in the mirror is all that visceral fat that's encasing your organs.
Oh, 100%. But you know, my brothers are making comments about me when I go home for the holidays. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I have high blood pressure and high cholesterol. And to be perfectly honest with you, I just wanted to curl up under a blanket in a dark room and be left alone. That's where I was at.
Wow.
And so I knew that something needed to change. And unfortunately, the scenario was that my medical training had not provided me with the tools in order to do that. So I didn't want to take a pill, and I wasn't going to take a pill to fix my obesity, you know, my overweight obesity issue. So I tried exercising my way out of this and it failed. I did get stronger, swim further. And this was a very rigorous exercise program, by the way. I was pushing hard, and I could, get stronger and run farther and things like that, but that could not fix these health issues. And then what ended up happening, Will, is actually it's so bizarre that this is actually what happened, but this is true.
Okay. What is it?
I went on a first date with the person who is now my wife.
Okay.
Right. We have 3 kids together now. And by the way, that's the other thing that happened during the book launch is we had another baby. So had a real baby and a book baby happened around the same time.
All right.
And well, so anyway, we're on a first date together in Carborough, North Carolina at a place called Acme. And I'm getting a pork chop. And she orders something that's not even on the menu. She says to the waiter, there's these sides. There's black-eyed peas, there's collards, there's mashed potatoes, right? You can get your sides to accompany your meat dish. She says, can you put 3 or 4 of these onto a plate for me and just make it look nice?
Wow.
So I'm like, who are you? It's 2013. Who is this person? Early 2013. Who is this person that I'm sitting here with? I've never been around anyone like you in my life. This is weird. Right.
Well, first of all, again, really, really clever thinking, right? Because most people just tick the boxes off a menu and order the appetizer and an entree or whatever it is. And here she is choosing something, as you say, that's on the menu, but not on the menu, and advocating for what she knew was going to be better for her.
So she looked amazing. Her health appeared to be completely aligned. She loved her food. She ate until she was full.
Cool.
And when we were done, she wanted the date to keep going. And I felt compelled to go home because I was exhausted. So this was not an intervention, unless this was like an intervention by God. This was though a seed that got planted in my brain, right? I noticed this and I ruminated on that. And then it was enough for me to say, maybe I should try that.
So that's how they define the better half, right?
Well,
like you were inspired, like it changed your mind, or you were maybe already on that threshold of knowing something needed to be done and you watched it being done right in front of your eyes, essentially.
It was a radical observation from my perspective, because I did not know a single person who was either vegetarian or vegan.
Right.
So to observe this, to be on a date with someone who is,
okay,
and see it in real life, and you go, interesting. Maybe there's something there.
Right.
And that was all that I needed. She never once in my entire life, in the 10 years that my wife and I have been together, we met in 2012 for the first time. 2013 was this date. In the 10 years that we've been together, she's never once said, this is what you need to do in terms of your diet. But I changed because of her.
Well, she set the example, showed it could be done, made you think differently. And frankly, what a great kind of like little restaurant hack you just shared, which is, if you can't find something that you feel is like exactly what your body craves from a health perspective, just go off. This is what I actually do. Go off to the sides, the contorni or whatever it is, and pick a few of those little side things. They have some roasted Brussels sprouts or some, broccoli or whatever it is that like is cool, and just have them bring you the sides, like 3 sides as an entree or 2 sides as an entree kind of thing.
Exactly. So, and the thing is, going back to the atomic habits idea, this moment when I had this smoothie, I felt instantly energized, instantly. Really? And there was a part of me that felt like, almost like I have been deprived and now I am receiving what I need.
Can I ask you, what did you have in that smoothie? I want to know. I want to know what it was that actually turned on your lights with that smoothie.
I am not a recipe guy, which is bizarre because here I am with a cookbook, right? Yeah. What I am is I'm a chemist. I like throwing stuff in there and see
Okay.
what happens.
Do you
All
remember
right.
what you threw in there?
Yes. Bananas,
Okay.
berries, multiple types, frozen,
Okay.
and greens.
What kind of greens?
So I think it was like a big bunch of kale. Like
Okay.
I'm talking green kale, and I'm ripping it off the stem and then just throwing it in there.
Cool.
All right. And then obviously liquid. And I think the liquid on that one was probably water, because there's no way I had any sort of plant milk in my fridge. There's no way. So and then some ice, just to kind of give it the proper texture that I was
Yep.
looking for.
Sure.
And so, buzz that. And this thing was, I mean, I'm not kidding. It's definitely more than 30 ounces, probably 36 ounces. And it took me maybe 3.5 large glasses to complete it. And I felt completely full.
Yeah. Right.
But I felt light and I felt energized. And I went, normally after dinner, for me back then, I would need to lay on the couch and just kind of decompress from dinner.
Yeah.
And I felt so energized that an hour later, I went to the gym and had a great workout. And this was, I think that the point from my perspective is this: it's not even like the energy level. What it is really truly was the juxtaposition of how I felt in that moment relative to how I felt prior to that moment.
Interesting. Yeah.
For anyone who has suffered with these types of issues, you just want to feel well.
Right.
And I felt so much better.
So, and look, we're both doctors. And so, the whole idea about an individual patient that we might be seeing, when there's a difference in their life, something's made a difference. Like that's it instantly is something that they are able to recognize and talk about. And so what you're just kind of sharing with me is sort of your side of the white coat kind of thing, where like you were feeling one way and then you tried something different and you felt completely different. And so, obviously that inspired you to dive deeper into doing all the things you've done. Has it changed the way that you were talking to patients as well?
So first of all, this is perhaps an N of one thing, right? And we may want population data to back up what we do. And part of what happened here was I had my N of one moment, and then I turned to the data. And this is where I discovered the relationship between dietary fiber and the gut microbiome.
Did you know anything about the microbiome before?
I did not.
Really?
I did not. And in fact, I trained with some of the leading, if you go to a microbiome meeting, you're going to hear one of the most brilliant people is Belfer Sarter. And I was in his clinic treating inflammatory bowel disease for years.
But he never told you about the microbiome.
It wasn't a focus, right? Because we're not talking about these nebulous ideas of the microbiome back in 2010, 2011. Right. We're talking about biologics, right? And inflammatory bowel disease. These are biologics, by the way, for people who are wondering. I'm talking about like very, very powerful anti-inflammatory drugs. But that's, I think, part of what happened is this inspired me to say, how come I haven't been taught this?
Interesting.
And to find the confirmation of how I felt as a single individual person in a overwhelming body of evidence that exists that I had not been taught in my medical training, despite being at these great institutions and having great mentors. It made me understand that we can't allow ourselves to remain within the box of conventional medicine.
Well, and like for me, it was a little bit different. I never had a problem with my weight. But for me, I got thrown into my interest in food and health before I went to medical school. I did a gap year and I went to the Mediterranean and I lived there. And by the way, I just came back from there a few days ago, doing research for my next book. And when I was there at the very beginning, before med school, what I was so interested in is how is it that some people live to eat as opposed to eating to live. Like the idea that you just kind of sit down and wolf your food down and get your calories in and keep on doing your stuff like
Right.
that's eating in order to survive.
Isn't that kind of an American thing, don't you think?
I think that anybody who is used to breaking bricks, like in a slag heap, I think
Right.
that's the mindset you have. Like you have a foreman who's whipping you, and it's not a pleasant way of living. And then, when I really embedded myself in Italy and in Greece and started to see how people were living, and then I went to Asia, what I saw was that people are excited about their food. Like when you just talked about your smoothie, your blender, and you were talking about the berries and the bananas, like you can see the passion in your eyes as you're recounting something. That's what happens in these countries that I just got back from Greece. Every time you sit down with anybody over a meal, their eyes light up when they start talking about their food. And it's something that, I really believe is really important. One of the things that by the way, I just sort of tearing a page from your playbook is this idea that I was doing research, looking at something that most people who are doing healthy eating don't spend a lot of time doing. That's why I did it. Plant-based foods, dietary fiber, absolutely important. I wanted to take a little bit of time to research something that most people don't think about for lots of reasons, which is seafood. Most of the data shows that people who eat seafood in moderation actually have better health outcomes. And I was so curious about like why that is and what about the omega-3s. And so I sat down and I looked at everything on the menu and, and to try different components of it. And one of the things I didn't realize for omega-3s, which of course you can get from plants through ALA, is that almost all the seafood, not just the greasy ones, actually, the oily ones actually have omega-3s. But one of the things that eating seafood doesn't give you is plant-based food. So when I sat down at a taverna and I was in Greece and I wound up looking at how to build my meal, what did I do? I went to the appetizers and the vegetables, and I did exactly what your significant other did back then. I went and put together, like I wanted to try some seafood stuff, but I put together a meal of Santorini and giant fava beans. I put together a meal of volcanic tomatoes with mint. I put together a meal with wild greens, salad greens that are basically harvested from the hills. You got to have a little trust that, like this is in the middle of the Mediterranean, so it's pretty healthy. The air is like 1,000 feet above the sea. They wash them up, they saute them with a little garlic, a little shallot. And it was so great. Like when they were bringing out the meals, like I kind of felt like you, which is, I was hungry. And yeah, like if somebody put a burger in front of me, I mean, I don't normally eat burgers, but I probably could have eaten one because I was pretty hungry. But just eating that healthy food in a healthy environment and then listening to the people talking about the food, because I would always ask people about what they were eating and where it came from and how do they prepare it, was just like an elevating type of experience. Is there one thing that you cook that you want to share with people?
There's so many that I love.
All right.
But before we even go there, I can't help but think about the Mediterranean here for a moment. So, so you mentioned, where do they get their food from? Where do they get their food from? Where does the produce and everything come from?
Well, so the priority is whatever they can actually get and grow locally.
Exactly.
Right. So here's some great things. Capers. They grow rocky little things. They pick them by hand. They're wild. They wash them. They rinse them. They brine them. Put in a little vinegar. They store them. They jar them. This is what they bust out when there's visitors. Tomatoes. It's tomato season in the summertime. They pick them. They harvest them. They bring them fresh. They buy them in the morning. They eat them at lunch and at dinner. And then they reload the next day by going back out to the market. It's a different mindset, but they're really proud of what they have. Now, obviously, look, we're in the 21st century. Planes fly, boats sail, trains deliver all kinds of stuff. So yeah, sure. Even in the Mediterranean today, if you look for the mass market stuff, you can find it. And that's the stuff that's actually bringing down their health too.
Well, and yeah, sure, you could get a Coca-Cola Classic if you want it, but you probably are paying $7 for that, right?
Right.
So that's part of the issue. But what I come back to, Will, thinking about the Mediterranean and why this is so beneficial, is that these are food traditions that originated prior to modern times.
Right.
And so because of that, they had to eat local. They had to eat whatever was available to them. They didn't have the advantages of a Whole Foods or Fresh Market or whatever it may be. And as a young country in the United States, we didn't establish, also being a melting pot, we didn't have those established food traditions that are based upon certain local foods. And so, as a result, I think we were more prone and susceptible to falling into the trap of just kind of eating whatever was presented to us.
We also want to have things that are convenient and less expensive. Whereas I think that in many other food cultures, they actually invest in their food because they know that what they are eating is going to go into their body and it's going to affect how they feel. So they're much more in tune with, I think, the land and the food and how they feel about it. I think that if there's anything that I would say growing up in America is that it's easy to get disembodied from yourself so that you're not thinking about how you feel after you eat. I mean, you talked about, laying down on a couch after to recover from dinner. Like, I think that, in most places in the Mediterranean that I know, my friends they'll have a great meal and then they'll go out for a walk, and because they feel good about it. And it's a beautiful location as well. And they feel better and they sleep better afterwards as well. As where it's you and I, getting our butts kicked in medical school and in medical training, like we get like no sleep on an on-call night. And by the way, that's so destructive for us. And so I think that, kudos to anybody who's a doctor. And this is what I'm trying to do by bringing my doctor friends onto this video series. Like, look, we're real people. We are just as vulnerable to the junk that's out there as anyone else. In fact, I would say maybe even more because we got our butts kicked in training, and pretty much every sensibility that we should have had for health, even though we're supposed to be healthcare providers, got stripped away from us. And so we've had to like earn it back and own it. So I think that the fact that you put out 2 New York Times bestsellers proves the fact that people want to hear from a credible source that actually can walk the walk and not just talk the talk.
Well, think about how we're talking about doctors and the rigorous lifestyle that we're forced into as a part of our medical training. And it's really no different than what a lot of people go through who live in poverty, to be honest with you. Think about the mom who's working 2 jobs to put food on the table for her kids, right? And because I know a lot of these people, and they don't have time to come up for air. They don't have time to take a break.
Yeah, right.
They need food that's inexpensive and cheap and quick and delicious. And so they fall into the exact same traps that you and I did.
Right.
And so, and then you see what happens in those communities where socioeconomic status becomes such a powerful thing in terms of health outcomes. This is part of the issue.
And on the other side of it, you see why doctors, many of them wind up being so ill prepared to talk about nutrition because they actually haven't had a good, necessarily good life themselves. Now, I'm going to ask you one quick question about what's in your book. So just to tell you a little story. So I am always fascinated by what the local market has.
Yeah.
Do you have anything with, is there any recipes contain garlic in your book?
Tons. I'm a huge garlic fan.
Cool. So let me just tell you something that I was at the market the other day and I found, it's a farmer's market. I found garlic scapes. Have you ever cooked with scapes?
No, tell me about that.
All right. So the garlic bulb is under the ground, right? It's the white flaky skin thing, right? You got to peel it. The cloves are inside there. It's got little hairs or the little roots on the bottom of it. Well, the stuff that's above the ground is this large, twisty stem-like thing, and I bought it. And I've cooked with scapes before. They taste like garlic, but here's what's wonderful about them is that you can actually caramelize them. Look at this thing, garlic scape.
Yum.
That's the stuff on top of the garlic.
Yeah.
Now you cut that up into like 2-inch segments, put it onto a cookie sheet, sprinkle a tiny bit of sea salt, a little extra virgin olive oil. And then because I like to do it together with some other vegetables, I take some shiitake mushrooms, slice them up thin, stick them in there, put them in an oven like at 400 degrees for 7 minutes. And what winds up happening is that the olive oil will actually start to cook and caramelize the garlic skips. Your whole house will have this wonderful aroma of a finished dish. But here's what's great. You take it out of the oven and you let it cool. Okay. And now you've got these caramelized, slightly crispy things. And then you can scoop them and you can just pop them into a salad. You can snack on them. There's so many different things you can mix them with. And it's a delicious, you can put it into pasta. It's a delicious way of doing it. So that's one of the more recent things that I actually cooked.
Oh, I love that. All right. So a couple things that I've been working on recently.
Okay.
I actually have 2 chapters in the back of the cookbook that I believe are unique to a cookbook. One is about fermentation.
Oh.
And the other is about sprouting. And I believe that these are 2 opportunities from a gut health perspective to enhance your gut health that most people are not doing. So fermentation, there's actually 17 recipes that I have. And there was a study that was done by people that I'm quite sure you know. I know them. Professors Sonnenberg and Gardner from Stanford University, published in the journal Cell right around a year ago. And what they found is that in an interventional trial, when they forced people to consume fermented food, because people were not consuming fermented food, most of us are not. When they forced people to consume fermented food in just 10 weeks, they enhanced the diversity of their gut microbiome. That's a measure of their gut health. And they also reduced measures of inflammation. I think that fermented food should be a part of everyone's routine. So
you teach people in your cookbook, how to do their own fermentation?
Yeah, so there's 17 fermentation recipes. I actually teach you how to create your own sourdough starter, multiple recipes to make with that starter. We have sauerkraut, we have pickles, we have kimchi.
Fantastic.
So I right now am drinking some kombucha.
What do you call the thing in the kombucha? The floaty thing?
The SCOBY.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, the SCOBY is at the top. I also have a kvass. So now kvass, fermented foods are celebrated food traditions from around the world.
Oh yeah.
Kimchi in Korea, sauerkraut in Eastern Europe, et cetera. You could go down the line. So kvass is a Eastern European beverage, and we make kvass in the Fiber Fields cookbook with beets, pears, and ginger.
All together.
Cool. All together. Now here's what's cool. This is what I love, Will. Number 1, there is no added sugar.
Beets have their own sugar?
Beets, pears, they have their own sugar.
Yeah.
Right? So you have the sugar that you need for fermentation, because in order to ferment, you do need that. But number 2, there's no added microbes. The microbes naturally exist on the skins of the ginger and the pears and the beets. They're already there. They're there when you purchase them.
Interesting.
And so by quite simply putting this combination together and then submerging it in some water, you within 24 hours will have bubbles.
Okay. And you do this like in a jar or in a bowl, or what do you actually ferment it in?
So when I do beverages, I go big, because from my perspective, I don't want 16 ounces that I had to wait 5 days for.
Right.
I want 32 ounces or more.
Okay.
So I get jars with a flip top lid.
Yep.
All right. And so the flip top lid will create a seal. Now, the thing that you do have to do, because I'm not kidding, you will have bubbles in 24 hours with these things, is you have to burp it.
You do.
So by burping it, what I mean is you go and you open up the jar and you allow the gas to come off.
Is it stinky?
No, it's not stinky. It smells great. It smells like ginger. But the issue is that if you don't burp it, it continues to pressurize.
Boom.
Exactly. What happens if you take a beer and you shake it up, or right? So that's what happens. And so you have to burp it. So I actually missed a burping session on my kvass one day.
What happened?
And we got beets on the wall.
So it's so interesting. I wouldn't have thought of putting beets and pears and ginger, although I love all 3 together. What does it taste like? Can you describe it?
Okay, so the beets impart that. I mean, I think it's beautiful, but it's like a basically deep magenta red, and the liquid becomes opaque. You can no longer see through this, and this is because of the beets. So you combine that with the pears give you that mellow sweetness. The ginger gives you that punch of ginger.
Mm-hmm.
You put these three together. Now, what is fascinating about fermentation, one of the things that I love, Will, is that flavors change.
Yeah, of course.
The profile changes. And where you end up, like if you were to sip this on day 1 or 2, it would taste like beets and pears and ginger.
Okay.
Where you end up on day 5 or 6,
all right, tell me,
is a melding of these flavors together. And it's hard to describe other than it has changed.
Is it like hard cidery, or is it smooth, or
Smooth, not spicy, not spicy.
so the ginger's been mellowed out?
The ginger has been mellowed out. You know, I'll give you another quick example. One of the recipes that I have in the Fiberfield cookbook is for fermented radishes.
Okay. Yep.
Now, as you know, radishes are health foods. These are great for you.
Yeah.
The problem is that I actually don't like them. I just have to be honest. Like I don't like the pepperiness of the radishes.
Yep.
If you ferment radishes,
What do you get?
It is a whole new game. So number 1, they are crispy. They're crispy as hell.
Okay.
All right. Crunchy. But the flavor, the pepperiness gets smoothed out so that it's really in the background. And then you bring in whatever new flavors from your fermentation. So pretend you do garlic, dill, and black peppercorns.
Okay.
It's going to taste like a little bit like a pickle.
Wow.
But
cool.
the crunchiest pickle that you've ever had. And we all know that you love a crunchy pickle.
So here we're back to your roots as a chemist, right? You got your basement with all the stuff going on and your experiments, and as you were talking about burping your container, I was thinking about chemistry class. Like how you have to tend to the Bunsen burner so nothing boils over or burns, right? Like you got to kind of be on top of it.
I actually have a food scale, a digital food scale, and the time that I pull it out is when I do fermentation, and it's because I actually feel like a chemist. I'm being very precise in what I'm doing. But the other thing that I encourage people to think about with fermentation, there's 2 things I want to just bring forward for people, because I'm a passionate advocate for this type of food. Number 1, fermentation is transformation. You transform the flavors, but you also are transforming the biochemicals. You get new types of fiber. There's a change to the proteins. You are actually reducing the presence of anti-nutrients, or if there were toxins, for example, if your food were sprayed with a chemical, actually the fermentation removes that. You are enhancing the vitamin content. I mean, it's amazing that
how does a vitamin content get enhanced? I guess different ingredients together.
Well, when you think about, for example, B12, Will. Now, I'm not saying that the B12 specifically is in fermented foods, but the B vitamins are in fermented foods. The B vitamins.
Yeah.
B vitamins are energy vitamins, right? And so when you think about, for example, B12 is produced by microbes. Microbes are capable of producing, when you give them the proper ingredients, they will produce things for us. And
so you create a little factory. You've created a little vitamin factory with your fermentation.
100%.
That's so cool.
The other thing that you've done is you are cooking, but it is the slowest cooking ever. When we talk about slow cookers, we're talking about 8 hours, right? People are slow cooking their food. This is the slowest cooking ever. You're slow cooking over 5 days.
Well, one of the things that I'm writing about in my next book is the fact that a lot of our food culture, just as you were talking about, come from thousands of years ago. So these techniques are, they may sound new if you're not familiar with them, anybody listening or watching this, but in fact, they've been known for thousands of years. And I'm writing about this incredible historical phenomenon where food and goods were traded along the Silk Road. Not the internet Silk Road, but the original Silk Road that connected China to Turkey in the Mediterranean, and went through all these mountains and deserts in Central Asia. And you could not bring fresh food for any great distance. And so a lot of the foods that were carried along were fermented in ceramic urns that were on camelback. And so a lot of the stuff, by the way, that sauerkraut, which I used to always think was a Germanic Eastern European food, right? cabbage, fermented, sliced up. And, when I was growing up, it was always put on hot dogs or whatever. It came from Chinese cabbage that was attempted to be transported over the Gobi Desert all the way over to Europe, and they would never last. And so they figured out how to ferment it, and it wound up eventually making its way into Eastern Europe and establishing itself as a tradition. And so, one of the things that I think is so wonderful about what we're talking about and what you have in your new book is really trying to bring into a modern context things that can't be wrong because they've been used for thousands of years.
Yeah, I view my cookbook, part of what I'm trying to accomplish is to take you on a culinary world tour. And what you're going to find is celebrated food traditions from across the globe, and you're enjoying them from the friendly confines of your own kitchen.
Well, listen, this is great. I need to wrap up right now, but look, thank you so much for sharing. And one of the things I wanted people to do is to really be a fly on the wall and hear, Dr. Will Bulsiewicz and Dr. WilliamLi having this conversation. And we could have been having this conversation sitting at a cafe someplace in the Mediterranean.
I wish we were.
So listen, tell everyone watching where they can find out more about you and your book.
Okay, so my book, The Fiber Fields Cookbook, is widely available, not just in the US, but including in the UK, Canada, Australia. And again, this is more than a cookbook. It's 125 recipes. It's full color photography, but it also is 11 chapters. Most of those chapters actually don't involve recipes. They involve me educating. And it has 2 recipe-based protocols. So I actually have protocols built into the program. So the Fiber Fields Cookbook is widely available. I'm very proud of it.
How do people find you on social? What's your handle?
You can come to Instagram and Facebook at The Gut Health MD. I'm technically on TikTok, but I'm just getting started. So I'm The Gut Health MD _. I had to add an underscore to the end. And finally, come to my website, theplantfedgut.com. Sign up for my newsletter. People seem to really love it. When there's breaking news research, this, Will. It's really hard to have a nuanced conversation on social media about research. So I like to send an email to my list. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, sign up for my email list.
I'm totally telling people to sign up and check you out. And by the way, TikTok, I started myself not too long ago, and I was amazed at how much traction. I did a video about carrots and carrot tops, and it had 1.1 million views.
Wow.
It was crazy. And I didn't have to dance or, talk about my fiat or whatever. So anyway, so listen, if you want to learn more about gut health, please check out Dr. Will Bulsiewicz and the Fiber Fueled Doc and the Fiber Fueled book and the Fiber Fueled cookbook. You should actually have the whole collection. Like I've got a whole collection now, and that should be in your bookshelf or on your mobile if you're doing audio. And then if you want to learn more about me and food as medicine and the work that I'm doing, I do have a free resource available on my website. So come sign up and download it. It's at www.drwilliamli.com, Dr. WilliamLi. And I'll just leave you with one thing that I think, Will, you and I both share is that, you got to really enjoy your food. It should really speak to you. And so what I always tell people is you should really love your food to love your health. And so with that, thank you very much. And we'll see you again soon, hopefully.
It was a great conversation. Thank you, Will. And thank you, everyone, for hanging out.
Hi there. If you enjoyed watching this video, I know you'll love the next one. Stay here and check it out. And I'll see you there.